I realized that my calling was to the ministry, to the gay community, that I shared with my parents that I was gay.
What did your parents say?
Well, my mother cried.
Uh-huh.
My father held my hand and told me that I was his son and he loved me no matter what. And that he didn't understand it, but that nothing could separate me from his love. Mm-hmm. And my mother has said much the same thing.
Thank God.
Absolutely.
You know, thank God for a mom and dad who will stand with a young person. And, you know, I think it's very important because no matter what happens to a young person in their life, they're still your boy, they're still your girl, no matter what happens in their life. And I think it's so important that we as mom and dads love through anything. And that's the way with Jesus, you know. Jesus loves us through anything. And that's the wonderful thing about Jesus, you know.
Absolutely. Jesus loves me just the way I am. I really believe that. Jesus loves the way I love.
Listen, Steve. This is an emotional interview for me. I just met Steve, and it's like meeting him in person right here. It's I want to put my arm around you.
Oh, well, my arms are right around you.
Religion, theology, creed, sacrifice, morality, superstition, prayer, spirituality, devotion, persuasion.
Well, Steve, it's amazing to see you. One thing that's completely amazing is that you're alive. And two, I don't think I've seen you since 1985. This is the video. I was honestly blown away to find you on Instagram recently.
Yeah, well, I was so surprised when you contacted me.
I guess for people, the listeners who might not know, is that my mom interviewed you in 1985.
Right.
My mom's Tammy Faye Bakker, for our listeners who are really clueless. And interviewed you in 1985. You were, I mean, you still are, a gay pastor.
Yes.
And with AIDS.
Living with AIDS, right.
And now, and the fact that you're still alive is a miracle.
It is, indeed. Yeah. I first got sick with AIDS in 1982 when they were still calling it GRID, gay-related immunodeficiency. Then I was sick with hepatitis, CMV, pneumonia, mononucleosis, herpes, shingles, a variety of fungal infections. And finally, I was diagnosed in April of '84 with stage 4 lymphoma and Kaposi sarcoma and full-blown AIDS, of course, and I was given 8 months to live.
I mean, so many questions. I mean, I guess the first question would be just like, you know, before I ask you about the interview, but how did you survive?
Well, I worked very hard at it. I believed it was possible. My doctor told me when I was first diagnosed as terminal, there are no 100% in medicine. And if 0.001% are going to survive AIDS, why not believe that you're going to be that 0.001% and behave accordingly? And so I set about to do the work of healing. There were no treatments. There was nothing that medicine could offer back then. My doctor said, you know, you in the church have more to offer than we do in medicine. I was diagnosed in April. 2 weeks after my formal diagnosis, I was invited to preach the Easter sermon at my church. And I said, oh, you mean for me to preach Good Friday, don't you? I'm dying. And he said, no, you need to preach Easter. And it was one of the greatest gifts that he could have given me, Reverend Ken Martin. It was such a valuable gift to have to look at what it meant to believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ as a person who was presumably terminal. What I discovered in the 2 weeks that I worked on that sermon and meditated and prayed was that if God is greater than the death of Jesus on the cross, then certainly God is greater than AIDS. And I proclaimed that, and everybody would, oh, how could you say that? But, you know, God is greater than AIDS. God's a greater reality than any disease. I said, you know, in the face of having this stigmatized illness and cancer, I can still laugh. I can still enjoy my friends. I can still dance and sing. I can still be fully alive, even in the face of a potentially terminal prognosis.
Well, I don't feel like we're going to get a lot of super miracles on on Loosen the Bible Belt or even in my church. So this is just, to me, is mind-boggling, and I think both me and Kristen are just blown away by your story. I mean, just that alone. I mean, being a gay pastor in the 80s had to have its huge challenges.
I mean, that's like as dangerous, right, as the disease.
Well, I was a pastor with the metropolitan community churches, and that's what I had gone to seminary for. I went to McCormick Seminary, a Presbyterian seminary, and I was studying for the ministry in MCC, and I was the pastor of MCC Hartford from 79 to 82.
What was their stance on gay at the time? Was MCC always good, or is that in recent years?
MCC was founded by Reverend Troy Perry as a safe place for LGBT people to worship together.
They're an amazing church. They had churches burnt down and survived so much.
And I was the first member of the clergy in MCC to be diagnosed with AIDS. So everybody was shocked because I had a reputation for being very vanilla, if you know what I mean. and everybody thought, it's going to be all the leather guys who get diagnosed with AIDS, and here I come along from New England, and in my preppy shirt and all of that, and they're going, oh my God, if he can get it, we all need to really watch out. So it was a huge lesson for the MCC in general. I came out about being a person with AIDS right away in the denominational magazine Journey, and I wrote articles every month about my journey with AIDS. I started to tell you that I think a large part of the reason was that I survived was because I worked at it and I had faith, and I got very lucky. My doctor, who is one of the premier AIDS researchers in the country, Dr. Alexandra Levine, she invited me to be the first patient to go on the very first antiviral they tried against HIV, a drug called Suramin. And it was a chemotherapy that we took once a week. I was the first patient to go on it. And within 6 weeks, all of my Kaposi sarcoma lesions had disappeared, and my stage 4 lymphoma was in complete remission. And I was doing that chemotherapy, as a matter of fact, when I was interviewed by your mother. She had sent me 2 first-class tickets to fly to Charlotte, North Carolina, to be on the show in person. My companion and I, because I was sick enough, I needed a companion to fly with. Her producer called me just as we were headed out the door to the airport and said, don't come, Tammy's sick, we're going to find another way to do it. They decided to do it by satellite. It was the first ever satellite interview in the history of PTL. I was already in complete remission by that point. I was very, very sick from the toxic side effects of Suramin. That drug actually killed a large percentage of the people who took it, and everybody else died from HIV and AIDS within a year or two. I'm one of 2 survivors of that drug.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, the stigma, like we've covered, like the stigma of being a gay pastor at that time, insane. And then the stigma of having AIDS in the 80s. I remember it being on the cover of Time magazine. I remember Ronald Reagan being afraid to talk about it.
That's right.
A lot of younger, I think, folks in the LGBTQ community weren't alive at the time or were just being born and don't realize how horrible that you folks with AIDS had it. It was just, you were seen as having the plague. It was...
That's right.
It was queer people too. It wasn't just like mainstream, right? It was gay people were also like, oh, wait, what? It was everywhere.
Yeah, and I lost a lot of friends when I was diagnosed who just were so scared that they couldn't deal with it. And if it hadn't been for a group of lesbians who took care of me in the first couple of years of my illness, I don't know that I would have survived that. But it was only the women that would come sit with me and bring me groceries and bring me communion and that sort of thing when I was so desperately ill in 82 and 83.
I think it's such an important message to hear. I think people need to hear this. I think it's important for the history of America and really important for the history for LGBTQIA folks to look back and remember that time.
Yeah.
I think nowadays we just have such short-term memories that we think like, oh, well, they had it easy, or this was that, or it's different. You know what I mean? And we don't realize that we've all, in our own times, have had our own struggles and our own horrible battles. So I can't even pretend to know what you've been through. I'm just curious because I've here my mom and dad are televangelists, of the Assemblies of God,
right?
And my mom asks to interview you, and I mean, most people would not fathom the Assemblies of God pastor, even talking to a gay person,
right?
Much less a gay person with AIDS, and then much less in their church, and then much less on national television. Right. So, do you remember how it came about that this was even going to happen?
Oh, absolutely. Apparently, your mother's producers, they were looking all through the Southeast for somebody with AIDS to come on the program. She wanted to be the first televangelist to interview a gay person with AIDS. I mean, what an amazing thing that was, and a testament to her bravery, her courage. They couldn't find anybody in the entire Southeast who was willing to come on the program. They happened to call in their search the director of AIDS Project Atlanta, who was a friend of mine, Ken South, Reverend Ken South, and he said, well, there's this guy in Los Angeles, a pastor with the MCC, who has AIDS and who might be willing to talk to you. And that's how they found me. I remember negotiating, first of all, that it be live so that they couldn't edit what I was saying, Yeah. And second of all, we talked about, coming to Charlotte and what I would need to do that sort of thing. Yeah, so my companion, Reverend Nancy Radcliffe, actually drove me to a studio in Ontario when they figured out that they couldn't do it in Charlotte. And, I've since learned, I didn't know this at the time, but I since learned that while your parents would have welcomed me and been very hospitable to me, they were worried that the camera crew wouldn't work and that I might be badly treated by hotel staff there at Heritage Village. And I don't know if that's true, but it's what I heard later.
Well, I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure that would probably be true. I mean, it was, Assemblies of God was not the most friendly folks, especially to anyone who is gay.
And there was still so much fear around AIDS. I mean, we were just figuring out how it was transmitted. So, I did a number of interviews in the early years, in the 80s, where they would not let me in the studio to speak to whoever I was talking to. They had me interviewed on a chair in an alley beside AIDS Project Los Angeles. And when we were done with the interview, I would take off the earphone and I'd hand it to the audio guy, and he would say, oh, no, you throw it away, or keep it, or do whatever, but no. And he wouldn't even touch it. They wouldn't even go inside AIDS Project Los Angeles to interview me. So there was a lot of fear.
So much fear.
Yeah.
And just watching how many people we're losing so many people,
Yeah. I know. I sing with the Gay Men's Chorus of Los Angeles, and I love to sing. I love to dance, and I don't dance very well, but I sing pretty well. And, I've been a member for 26 years now, and the younger guys, some of whom weren't even born when I started singing with the chorus, I had occasion to tell my story in the context of a concert a couple of years ago, and so many of the young guys came up to me and with tears in their eyes afterwards saying, I just had no idea. And others have talked to me since about it in the younger generation of the chorus and said, what was it like? And I said, well, imagine if your whole crowd here in the Gay Men's Chorus of Los Angeles, 3/4 to 2/3 of them got sick and died pretty quickly and pretty horribly. That's what it was like. And they were like, they're always like, oh my God, how did you handle that? How did you survive? And it was through faith and fairy dust.
Oh.
I would travel all over the U.S. after I got well in 87. I was appointed to be the director of AIDS ministry for the Metropolitan Community Churches worldwide. So I traveled all over the nation and around the world carrying a fairy wand because there were so many good fairies who were dying. And we're reminded in Peter Pan that fairies die because people don't believe in them. And so it was important for us to believe in ourselves and believe in each other enough to do the work of healing, whether it be healing into life or into death.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you find it bizarre that Tammy Faye wanted to interview you?
Well, I didn't, to tell you the truth, I knew who your parents were, and I'd never really watched a lot of their programming, but Tammy Faye always struck me as being like, a little outside the typical televangelist framework. And so when I was offered that opportunity, I thought, I'm going to give it a shot, and I'm going to do my best to present myself as a real live human being, a Christian with faith, a Christian living with AIDS, a Christian who is a homosexual. And I don't think that I was prepared for what happened during the course of that interview, because your mother started off, she wouldn't even say homosexual. She started off by saying, when did you first notice you were different? And I introduced the word homosexual, and then she used it, and then we switched to gay, and then finally she started talking to me about having AIDS and all of that. And I could see her opening, her heart was just opening throughout the whole interview. And by the end of the interview, I mean, we had a real connection of the heart. I could really feel that. And that really surprised me. I mean, I didn't expect that would happen, but it did.
Yeah, she's an amazing woman like that, and she has such powerful empathy.
Yes.
That she can't turn it off even if she wanted to, I mean, I was honestly because I know my dad probably had to have part of the decision in having that happen, and
sure.
And just knowing that both of them were there at that point in that time, and, I mean, my dad is a Trump supporter and very conservative and all this stuff, but also knowing that, there was still the compassion that they had always sticks with me, and I hope it sticks with their history. It's something I'm very proud of, that moment. And I don't know if you know this, but you changed the trajectory, not of just my mother's life, because it changed her life completely. I mean,
tell me about that. I've heard that said, and I've heard you say it, and in what way? Tell me. I
mean, she was always looked at, I think, as a kind of a special person by people in the gay community, but that broke it. That broke open the gates. She was safe. She was one of ours. She was an ally. Maybe would not be considered maybe an ally in those terms today, but then they knew we have somebody safe. Right. And the floodgates opened, and it just changed her. And I think people at the church came out to her. She was just never, like you said, you interviewed her and she couldn't even say the word homosexual. And then the next thing you know, people left and right are saying, this woman is someone who's safe. This one's someone who loves us. This is somebody who cares about us. And it was that moment. And for me, I was 10 years old. So I remember hearing about it because I remember being scared of the idea of AIDS and things like that. But it also triggered something in my brain, in my work, especially 10, 11, 12, 13 years ago, where I became an ally and became very outspoken on LGBTQ issues and lost a lot because of it, more so than my parents did for the interviewing you, which is surprising. I guess they were just a machine at the time, but, it really cost a lot. But it was because I saw the bravery in my mother. I saw the bravery in someone like you, you know what I mean, that I'm able to continue my work and go, these boxes that we've created in religion have to be destroyed.
Yes.
There has to be room at the table for everyone, and forgiveness and love and hope for everyone, even for those when we misunderstand each other. And because I would say, there was no, I don't know if my mom ever came out completely as being affirming, but I know that it didn't matter to her. All that mattered to her was love. And for me, I built on that foundation. And so I have to say, if it wasn't probably for that day and that interview and that moment in time, I don't know where my career would be. I don't know where my mother's career would have been. It was people in the gay community who embraced her when we lost everything.
Yeah.
And kept her afloat. The Eyes of Tammy Faye was made by World of Wonder, which is run by two gay men who, loved Tammy Faye. And everyone I've talked to always goes back to that video, to that moment in time. Everywhere I go, every conference I've been to, everywhere I've spoken, as soon as I became an ally, people started saying that video, the video, and it was just, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to do it. And I'm so glad that they found someone who was a pastor and had AIDS and things like that, because when I look at that, it made me feel like, I don't have half of that against me. I have to make the right choice. I've got to follow my convictions, and seeing my mother to be able to be brave to do that, and for you two to come together and have that moment. I don't know how many lives it changed for the people who saw it, but I know for me, and I know for my house, it changed us forever, and I'm eternally grateful.
Well, I hardly know what to say. I'm very grateful that happened for you, and I'm very glad if I had some small part in it.
Well, you did.
Well, thanks. I was amazed that she, by the end of the interview, called me a Christian. She said only a Christian could say that, and only a Christian could feel that. And I thought, right on, Tammy. That's great. And I tell you, Jay, everywhere I spoke, doing the fairy wand thing, but I preached and I taught all over, and everyone always wanted to see that tape. They wanted to see that interview. And always, it was really interesting because so many times I would, stick the tape in the video player and they'd play it, and people would start off by giggling.
Yeah.
They were laughing, and then as the interview progressed and they saw what was happening between Tammy Faye and me, but largely for Tammy Faye, they were all just like slack-mouthed, and by the end of the interview, they always stood up and cheered.
Just as someone watching this as an 8-year-old, right? Like, it was such a testament to vulnerability and strength in vulnerability. The thing that stuck out to me, you said Jesus loves my love the way I love. I remember even being young, being like, bold, ballsy, buddy, good job, right? Like, you both showed up exactly who you were, and it took an incredible bravery in this vulnerability, and then in that you connected and you can see the transformation. The reason people applaud is because it's so real and tangible. Honestly, thank goodness you weren't in the same room. Our heads would have exploded, right? like people would have been stroking out all over the place because we could barely handle it, via satellite, right? So, right. Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
Well, no, that's great. That's great. And I have to give credit, too, to the Holy Spirit because, I said some things in that interview that were just popped out of my mouth. For instance, at the moment where she said, well, maybe you just haven't given women a fair try.
That's right.
That's a good one.
And as I recall, I told her, yeah, I tried, but it just wasn't there,
But also, those were the questions that everyone's mom had, right? And so having this opportunity to ask them was so important.
Yeah. But I said at that point, I think if I had tried to make a commitment to a woman, it would have been disrespectful to the woman. And Troy Perry has since told me that was the moment he knew that God was at play in that interview, because that's the kind of language that a Southern Assemblies of God person would have used to talk about women. Are you being disrespectful or respectful of women? I'm from New England. What did I know? But somehow those words came out of my mouth.
I remember telling somebody once, I was like, if I was gay and I had ever come out to my mom, I'm like, that's exactly what she would have said to me. You know what I mean? Like, that was just natural, her reaction. You know what I mean? It was just like, have you tried liking girls? You know what I mean? I was like, that would totally be like... So I was just like, it's so undeniably my mother.
Yes. it was a remarkable thing that she asked the question she did, because a lot of people come up to me after I show the video and they say, I mean, those were really stupid questions, you know?
Right.
And I said, no. They were absolutely the right questions for her audience, you know? She knew who her audience was.
I mean, especially in 1985. I mean, you think you have a huge conservative and some liberal folks watching my parents' show. But, you know, those are the questions they had. Those were the arguments that they would use. You know what I mean? And you were just slowly disarming the questions and answering the questions that so many of these people in America were too afraid to ask. You know, we had to ask the dumb questions to get to the good ones, you know?
Absolutely.
Did you think it was a bait switch? Like, did you go in a little bit of armor?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like, what do you got for me, Christian lady? You got some questions?
You know, I was a little worried that, you know, she would try to convert me or, you know, tell me, well, if you were just straight, you'd get over this AIDS thing, which, you know, a lot of more fundamentalist conservative Christians were saying at the time. If you just convert to heterosexuality, then maybe God will heal you of your AIDS. But here I was saying, God healed me, and I'm gay, and I'm proud to be gay. I'm out and proud.
But also, like, what a bad argument for them to make on their religion. Like, and guys were, I could, but yeah, no thanks. Right?
Yeah,
right. No, I'll stick with the disease and said, sorry. Go ahead. I'm not gonna.
I was invited to the very first prayer breakfast at the White House. The first time the White House did a prayer breakfast, the first year that Bill Clinton was president. And it was 1993. And sitting on the other side of Bill Clinton was a conservative evangelical pastor who had this ministry to convert gays and make them into ex-gays, supposedly, and then that would help them battle AIDS. And Clinton would turn to him and talk to him, and he'd just turn to me and like roll his eyes like but I mean, he didn't make any comments about the guy, but his eyes rolled, that's for sure.
It's, you know, Troy Perry, also the founder of MCC's, played such a huge part in my life.
I was just with him this morning.
He's a great man. And
he really is.
We had talked about the video. PFLAG gave me an award, and they had to choose a presenter, and they chose him to give me the first Ally Award.
Oh, nice.
Christian Ally Award. I believe when he gave it to me, he actually brought up the moment with my mom when he was presenting. And it's wild to see how life kind of moves in these cycles and in these circles. Yeah. And it's these moments that kind of type of thing that keeps me excited about living life and living life well.
Yeah.
And staying in the ministry, you know, because there's parts of me that would love to quit and love to give up. But I see stories like you and messages like, you know, that you shared with my mom and seeing that. And MCC in general has just been so supportive of me.
I'm glad to know that. Well, by the way, Troy said, I told Troy I was going to be doing your podcast this afternoon, and he said, well, be sure and give Jay my love. So, yeah.
Return the love from me as well, because
I sure will.
We've had some great times. You know, I often tell a story about Troy, how when I spoke at my first MCC conference, I was like, you know, I got to the MCC conference and they gave me this really nice assistant to run me around and take me to places. And then he took me to Chick-fil-A, which I thought was really weird. And we had a chicken sandwich and had this long conversation. And I said, and then I was sitting there and someone goes, you know Troy? And I'm like, yeah, he's been taking me around today. And they're like, Troy Perry. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, he founded the MCC. I thought he was, that they had given me an assistant. And the founder of the whole denomination is driving me around.
Right.
Just hanging out with me like no big deal, and buying me Chick-fil-A of all places, you know. So that was always a trip. You know how humble of a human being he is. You know,
he is indeed.
You know, he wasn't like the whole time like I founded this. He was just like, hey Jay, let's talk about what you're doing in your journey, and let me get you a sandwich. And I was like, oh, this assistant that they've given me is so lovely. You know, and it's like, no, this is the guy who started the church.
Well, he is truly a great prophet of God, God has used him mightily, and he's, you know, I see him almost every week in church. We sit together at church. He invited me to sit with him 5 or 6 years ago, and I was like, really? You want to? And so we sit together every Sunday that we're both there, and he is just the most lovely man, and he's just so sweet and humble, as you said, and just a great guy, and obviously one of the great prophets of our time.
I feel like I should interject here and say that just so everyone knows, this was about 8 or 9 years ago, Jay, when you were going through Chick-fil-A with the leader. Right. Everyone, just so you know, we didn't used to care about these things. We're just learning that we could Google who's giving money to who. Right. And at the time, Chick-fil-A was nice to everybody.
No, but we knew. No, when we went to the Chick-fil-A, I think that we both kind of knew, but we just were hungry.
It was your forgiveness chicken?
I don't know what it was. I was with an older gay man, so I was like, I can go to Chick-fil-A.
You brought a sponsor?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Maybe we were going to burn the place down. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
I remember touring with Dykes of Hazzard, and I have a T-shirt that says Dykes of Hazzard, and I would go to Chick-fil-A, and they were nice to me, and that was about where I left it, right? Like they were nicer to me than I would be if I was working fast food, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I've never been hoped for a repentance so bad in my life as that I have for Chick-fil-A, because I just love those chicken sandwiches. Damn.
Yeah.
They're good.
Yeah.
We just need one of the Chick-fil-A family people to turn out queer, and then we can all go back to Chick-fil-A sandwiches, right? We need somebody. Can we get the gay mafia #1 on the agenda? Convert one Chick-fil-A grandchild.
Well, I bet you we don't really have to convert anybody. I'm sure there's somebody gay in there.
Yeah.
Correct. But it's better for them in their own acceptance if they think we did it to their kid.
Yeah.
I'm going to help them on their journey to self-discovery.
Oh, God. Yes.
Did you know that you're going to be in the film?
I am?
That's coming out. I don't know if you're allowed to talk about it or not. I don't know if they made you sign contracts.
I don't know about it.
But there is a Tammy Faye film coming out.
Jessica Chastain?
With Jessica Chastain, and your interview is one of the big scenes in the film.
No kidding. Wow. Well, I'd heard that they were making a film, and I didn't know if they would be using that the interview at all. But I'm glad to hear they are. I mean, it was a turning point.
Well, the rumors I've heard about it is that they're actually using your footage with her as my mother, but she's sitting in front of the TV, and it is you on the television.
I wonder if they know I'm still alive.
I mean, no disrespect, but they probably didn't think so,
no.
right?
Yeah.
They probably didn't check.
No, I mean...
They're like, this guy's not alive. We can use the footage.
No, yeah. Okay. When was this? 1985? All right. And we don't even have to look.
Right. No, I'm... I've heard that they were doing the film, and I wanted to get in touch with her because I heard her mention that interview in an interview that she was doing. So I wanted to get in touch with her, but how do you get in touch with a movie star? I don't know.
No, it's
Twitter.
Twitter, yeah.
Twitter.
She has an Instagram account, but she has like 10 million followers.
Twitter, Instagram.
Yeah. Well, then why would she notice me?
Because we're going to start, when we release this, we'll start a hashtag something. We'll call it Get Jess's Attention or something.
Hey, Jess.
Hey, Jess.
Right. Yeah.
I am just, you just,
it's okay.
It's just, you had a huge impact.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for what the LGBTQ community has done for my family and stood with my family when most everybody pretty much told us to go to hell.
Right.
And even surprised by some of the folks who've even loved my dad, even through his changes and everything, and it's just, it's one of those things that pain recognizes pain and loss.
Right.
And
yes,
it's just interesting to see how that interview, helped set up a safety net for us when everybody, went from loving and wanting to be on the show to no one wanting to have anything to do with my family. And
isn't that amazing?
I'm really grateful for the way things worked out. I don't know how I sometimes struggle with the idea of an interventionist God, especially after I lost my mom to cancer. But
yes.
But I don't know. It gives me hope. That's what I say. Is it gives me great, great hope, and to be able to talk to you, and the fact that you're still alive to me is just, it's a miracle. Just pure and simple a miracle. There's no other way to explain it.
You know, in the medical world, they call me an anomaly. And in the church world, they call me a miracle, or what happened to me is a miracle. And, you know, I was thinking about that 20 years ago or so. And, you know, I've been in a lot of Gilbert and Sullivan productions back when I was an actor and singer and dancer. And there's a song in Pirates of Penzance that I wrote new lyrics to. And if you don't mind, because it conveys the dilemma that between the two worlds I live in, the medical world and the spiritual world. I am the very model of a medical anomaly. I've had KS, lymphoma, hepatitis, thrush, and CMV, bacterial pneumonia, and adrenal insufficiency. All this and more because I caught a virus that's called HIV. And then I took an antiviral just like chemotherapy. It made me sick, my hair fell out, I suffered neurologically. But hey, it worked, it stopped all of the HIV activity. My lymphoma's in remission and there is no more KS to see. Lymphoma's in remission and there is no more KS to see. Lymphoma's in remission and there is no more KS to see. Lymphoma's in remission and there is no more KS to see. Now many years have passed and I'm as healthy as a horse can be. It's certainly a miracle for anyone with faith to see. But still in journals medical and science and oncology, I am the very model of a medical anomaly.
Yay, amen.
I know your mother loved to sing.
Yes.
And I love to sing too. You know, that reminds me, she sent me some cassette tapes of her albums. And one of them, I was having a particularly hard time. A few months after the interview, I had gone blind from the toxic side effects of Suramin. I was paralyzed on the left side of my body. I was wasted away to a skeleton with skin. I was having a really hard time. And I put in her tape one day, and the first song that popped up was, "Don't give up on the brink of a miracle. Don't give up, for God's still on the throne." Something like that. Anyway,
right.
I played that over and over and over again. I started singing along to it and cheering myself on with it. Don't give up on the brink of a miracle. I used that to lift my spirits and not give up. And it worked. Here I am.
All right, I'm turning into Tammy Faye and I'm getting too emotional. Runs in the genes.
Yeah, that's cool.
It really does. It's so organic, Jay. When it was starting, I was like, oh, yep, okay, there's the baker. Here it comes. Let there be no denying.
So, yes, Kristen, take over, please.
No. We're just going to sit here in your sobs for a minute.
It's really good. No, I think that it's great that a man can show that kind of emotion.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Thank you.
And it's authentic. And that
it's authentic. It's from the heart.
I think that's what that video speaks of, is how authentic that exchange was. And you clearly have never, not once in your life, best as I can tell, not been yourself. That is a miracle in and of itself. After the interview, what happened next? What was the next, professionally, spiritually, romantically?
Right. What happened next after the interview was that the Suramin trial started. People started dying from the drug, and they ended the Suramin trial at the end of December of '85. And I proceeded to get sicker and sicker and sicker. The drug blew out my adrenal glands. It blew out my testosterone supply. It blinded me. I became paralyzed on my left side. I was a wreck. I lost all my hair. I wasted away to nothing. And everybody was waiting for me to die. And I would kind of accepted the fact that, I was severely ill, and I'd seen so many people die of AIDS from exactly the same kind of condition that I was in, that I kind of went for the ride, and I had absolute faith that there would be life after life, because I had died 2 weeks before your mother interviewed me. I had died and been brought back. And that moment of crossing over was huge. I had such a huge turnaround from that experience. Suddenly I was at peace. It was the peace that passes all understanding. I understood what I'd never understood about the world, about myself. I was surrounded by love. It was a perfect peace and perfect wholeness. And then I was back in my body and I was pissed. But you know, I've never really been scared of being dead since then. And I've come very close to death a few times since then as well, including that period right after the interview.
Well, Steve, what would you like to leave our listeners with? I mean, you know, people listen to this, they, you know, probably are somewhat holding on. Some are holding on by a string with religion. Some don't want anything to do with it. And some might be in the same situation where life seems like it's, you know, no hope. What would you leave them with?
Well, there's always hope. There's always hope. You know, I was a chaplain at the AIDS hospice here in LA in the early 90s, and you know, I knew what it was like to be where they were on their deathbeds, because I'd been there myself. And I would always try to find out what people believed. And even if you believe that there's no life after death, at least it's an end to pain. It's an end to struggle. So there is hope. And there is healing even into death. My experience, faith works. You know, it really pays off to believe in something greater than yourself, a power greater than yourself. I'm in recovery, and I you know, really think that the wisdom of the 12-step programs of, you know, saying there's a power greater than yourself. Yeah, of course there is. You know, try to bring in the tides or to stop the tides, you know, if you want to know a power greater than yourself. For me, that power is God, as I know God through Jesus Christ, through the resurrection, through the incredible journey that God has led me on in this life. You know, faith works. Keep on hoping, keep on laughing, keep on singing, keep on dancing, even if it's just in your heart. And, you know, even in death, you will live.
Well, folks, me and Kristen Becker here at the Loosen the Bible Belt podcast are glad to do the part 2 interview with Steve.
Yes.
35 years later to check in with them, and good news, he's still here. So,
amen.
Thanks for listening. Kristen, you got anything?
I think maybe we'll be sure that we're linking everybody to the interview, the original interview, and where to find Reverend Steve.
All right. Keep on dancing.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you so much.
Keep on believing.
Religion, theology, creed.
If you like what you heard,
or even if you don't, come over and subscribe to the show. And you can give it 5 stars in Apple Podcasts. You can write a little review, and we'll read it on a future show.
We'd love to hear from you. You can email us at loosenthepodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to go a little further,
if you want even more of us, then you can go over to patreon.com/loosenthebibleBelt and join the movement.
Our patrons get access to exclusive bonus episodes.
You can follow us on Twitter, too. We are LTBB Tour, and tag a friend.
Especially that friend. They need it.
You know which one.
You know the friend.
You know which friend needs it. Have a good week. Our show is produced by Woody Battaglia and engineered and edited by Caleb Rowe. Our theme music is by Amy Bingo Bingaman.
You know, his own parents were afraid to touch him. His own sister was afraid to touch him. And he said, to think that I might never again have a hug. You know, and how sad that we as Christians, who are to be the salt of the earth, and we who are supposed to be able to love everyone, are afraid so badly of an AIDS patient that we will not go up and put our arm around them and tell them that we care.
Yes. I know, it is tragic, and that's the tragedy
Steve,
of the situation.
I just want to tell you something.
What's that, Tammy?
If there would have been any way, I know you were sick, and that's the only reason we didn't have you come and sit in the studio next to us today, because you have your chemotherapy treatments, and you needed to get home quickly so you wouldn't miss them. But I want to tell you, there's a lot of Christians here who love you and who wouldn't be afraid to put their arm around you and tell you that we love you and that we care.
Thank you, Tammy. God bless you for saying that. I think that's a very, very important thing you're doing.
Steve, doctors are desperately trying to educate.
Hi, I'm Caleb with Post-Christian Podcasting. If you enjoyed this show, you might also like Everyone's Autonomous with Marie Delafont.
So I had been born into Christianity, raised in a very literal interpreting home. So the Bible was the true word of God. The earth was made in 6 days. We weren't permitted to investigate evolution or anything like that. It was that kind of household, very evangelical. And then I was even more strict with my own daughters and really tried to keep them from the world. So, of course, if you picture a beach ball that's submerged, right, and then you take your hands off and that mother comes flying out of there, there's going to be fallout from that. And so my poor daughters, they had a front row seat to my gong show deconversion there, and they were in their teens at the time. And frankly, they were relieved. Yeah. They were happy not to have so many rules all the time, and to finally have a sense of their own autonomy, to borrow your word there.
That was a Post-Christian podcast.